Hey, budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we pot up and fertilize my begonia seedlings. So let's go. I live in New Hampshire. I garden in USDA Zone 5B. Based on my zip code, my average last frost date is around May 15th. Today is March 17th. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I'm about 8.5 weeks away from my average last frost date. I've grown wax begonias from seed for a number of years. It's actually a fun plant to grow from seed. 32 days ago, we multi-sowed some wax begonia seeds. That was on February 13th. It's a very slow growing plant, but I still enjoy growing it. I'll be sure to add a link to that video where I sowed the seeds in the description in case you missed it. Once I had a fair amount of germination in my restaurant takeout containers, I removed the humidity dome. I also removed the trays off of the seedling heat mat. The trays continue to stay under my LED shop lights, which are on 16 hours a day. They come on at 5 a.m., they go off at 9 p.m. At this point, I've been bottom watering the trays because I don't want to introduce fungal issues such as damping off. The seeds that were sown were seeds that were collected myself. In other words, they're not pelleted. They are very, very tiny and they were like dust. So when I sowed the seeds, I basically just sprinkled them on top. You never know how many plants are going to germinate. Well, I have to tell you, in some cases, there is a ton of germination. There are a ton of seedlings. I'm sure I can't keep them all. In other cases, there was fair germination, which is perfectly fine by me. And then in other cases, there was zero germination. One of the reasons could be, since I'm collecting my own seeds, the plant could be producing seeds that are sterile, so they're not going to germinate. And that's perfectly fine. You take your chances when you collect your own seeds, especially when it comes to begonias, be it wax begonias or tuberous begonias. I'm very happy with the germination that I got. I have more than plenty begonia plants to play with for this year. I preferred to multi-sow my begonia seeds in restaurant takeout containers like this. They're very small. They take up very little room under my grow lights, and then only the seeds that are viable are going to germinate. Once they do germinate, then I can go ahead, I can prick them out, put them in 6 cell packs, and that ensures that my trays that are full of 6 cell packs will be full, that I'm not going to have 50% or 20% germination. I should have close to 100% germination in my trays. Because I don't know about you, but I get to a point where I'm running out of room under my grow lights. So it's very important to make sure all of the cells are filled with plants. At this point, these seedlings could still stay in this container. But there are a couple of things. Number one, there are no nutrients in here because I use seed starting mix. And now I want to go ahead and bump these up into 6 cell packs and start giving them a little bit more room to grow. And also, since they have their true leaves on them, I can go ahead and start fertilizing them. And when it comes to potting these guys up, I will be potting them up in potting mix at this point. You can use whatever potting mix you feel comfortable with when it comes to seed starting indoors. I like to make my own potting mix because I start so many plants from seed, and I can reuse that potting mix material for outdoor containers and pots. The recipe that I use is 4 parts of peat moss, although you can use cocoa coir, and I buy my peat moss in bulk at a local garden center. And then I add 1 part of vermiculite. Vermiculite helps retain moisture. I buy that in bulk off of Amazon. And then I add 1 part of perlite, and I also buy that in bulk off of Amazon, and perlite helps with good drainage. And then I sprinkle the top layer with garden lime. The garden lime helps offset the pH of the peat moss. If you are going to make your own potting mix and you're going to use cocoa coir, you don't need to add any garden lime. It's just if you're using the peat moss. And then I go ahead and I pre-moisten my potting mix. I like to pour boiling water on top of it and mix it in nicely. The reason I use boiling water is to kill off the chance of any fungus gnat eggs that might be in there. And then I cover the mix, I let it cool down, and then it's good to use after it's cooled down. The seedlings will be potted up into 6 cell packs. The 6 cell packs will get placed into a 10 by 20 tray. And the reason that it's called a 10 by 20 tray is because of the dimension. It's 10 inches one way by 20 inches the other way. A common question I get asked is which 6 cell packs do I use and which 10 by 20 tray do I use? I really just like to use the cheap ones. I don't buy anything fancy, and I realize they don't last forever, but honestly, I use them for a few years. I take good care of them, and then as they start wearing out, I throw them away. But I also get them for free off of Facebook Marketplace. A lot of times friends and family, neighbors, they end up with an abundance of these types of things that they don't want. So I end up getting it that way as well. And then there's a local garden center that has a recycling bin. I often will find trays and pots there. So definitely check with your local garden center and see if they have something like a recycling bin. So now let's go ahead and prick out and pot up some of these seedlings. And since they have their first set of true leaves, I'm going to show you my process for fertilizing them as well. When it comes to your potting mix, you want to make sure that it's not dripping wet. So when you squeeze it, there should be no water dripping from it. However, when you let go, it should hold its form, and that tells you it's the right consistency. Here's the 6 cell pack that we're going to use, and notice it has drainage holes in the bottom. That's very important. Whatever container or pot you use needs to have drainage holes in the bottom. Let's go ahead and add our potting mix to our 6 cell pack. It's very important that you fill up your 6 cell pack to the top. You want to press down, and the reason for that is you are trying to get rid of any air pockets that might be in there. If there are air pockets in there, that can cause a lot of issues. And one of the main issues is when it comes to bottom watering, you may not be able to fully bottom water a particular cell. Also make sure that you're not pressing down too hard, because if you press down too hard and compress the soil, it's going to cause problems for proper root development. And now our 6 cell pack is ready for us to fill. I'm just going to use a pen, and I want to make a hole in each of the cells. Now, I know the roots of the begonia are not very deep, so the hole doesn't need to be very deep either. I'm just adding a label, so it says wax begonia, and it's a white color flower. It's a taller wax begonia, and it has a green leaf. So I'm just going to use my pen, and I want to get underneath the plant. When it comes to handling the plant, you want to be very careful. You can handle it by a leaf, and should a leaf break, it should be fine, but try to be gentle with your plant the best that you can be. And it has a really nice root system that it's already started to create. So I'm gently going to get the roots to go beneath soil level. And then what I want to do is just backfill around the base of the plant very carefully. You can use your fingers, you can use the back of your pen. And a lot of times with begonias, you can actually just kind of press them down in place and they will be fine. You can't do that with a lot of plants, but you definitely can do that with begonias very carefully. And that's what it looks like from the side profile. At this point, I'd rather go after the bigger seedlings like this one over here and leave the smaller ones like this one for a different day. So I'm going to take my pen again and I'm going to go under here. And that's what that little seedling looks like. And it's amazing for how little the seedling is. It will take off over time. So again, we're just going to place it and then we can just backfill. And once again, since they're fairly flat, it's okay to just kind of push them in place. I just think it's so much fun to collect your own seeds of begonia plants. If you haven't done it, I highly recommend you try to look for your seeds this year. I'll also put a link to the seed collecting video in the description so you know what to look for. That one has a really big root system going on. When it comes to many seedlings, including these begonia plants, it's to my benefit to get them potted up. They really need that fertilizer, they really need that space. And the longer they stay in the restaurant takeout container without any nutrients, they just won't thrive. And they really need the space to be able to grow. You might notice sometimes on your seed starting or potting mix that it's getting a little bit of algae. My experience has been that usually is not a problem. I try not to worry about those things. I worry more about just making sure my plants are getting what they need, especially when it comes to these begonias. They've been in that restaurant takeout container for quite a while. So it's inevitable that there will be a little bit of algae, and that's okay. It's not going to harm the plant generally. Again, I'm pressing very carefully on it just to get it in place. And if I wanted to, I could kind of tip it up a little bit like this. This one does not have as much of a root system to it, but it will be totally fine. And if you look at the base, there might be a little tiny seedling next to it. I can always thin it out later. I mean, it is so small, it's not worth it for me right now. It's such a satisfying feeling when I get my seedlings potted up. I love this process. And we're just going to go after our last seedling here. And that's what that looks like. We'll go ahead and we'll place it. And we now have 6 little begonia plants potted up. Aren't they the sweetest little things? When it comes to watering, I'm just using this type of container. And it's marked, this is a 1-gallon container. And you see this funny mesh bag in here? This is optional. I like to use this. And inside of it, I have 4 tablespoons of what's called mosquito bits. I use mosquito bits to help control fungus gnats. Honestly, I have not had a major issue at all with fungus gnats this year. I think part of it is because I'm sterilizing my soil with the hot water, and part of it's because I'm watering every time with this solution of the mosquito bits. So it's 4 tablespoons of mosquito bits to 1 gallon of water, and I let the mosquito bits sit for 30 minutes. I reuse it a number of times. In other words, I let it sit for 30 minutes. I use up all the water in here, and then I fill it up again with 1 gallon of water, let it sit for 30 minutes, and reuse it again. You can reuse it a number of times. I don't know what the maximum number of times is, whatever you feel comfortable with. For me, I use it a bunch of times before I dump it all out and add another 4 tablespoons of mosquito bits to this. Again, that's optional. It is safe. It's not harmful to your plants. And since we're going to be fertilizing, I'm going to be adding Miracle Grow. You can use whatever fertilizer you want. The key is to only use a half a strength of what it says on the package. For the water soluble Miracle Grow, it says a half a teaspoon per gallon of water. So we're going to be using half of that. That would be 1/4 of a teaspoon of Miracle Grow to a gallon of water. So we're going to add 1/4 of a teaspoon, and I'm just going to pour it in on the side here. And I'm just going to mix it in. And now I'm just going to cover it up. Keep in mind when it comes to fertilizing, watering, adding mosquito bits, it's really just up to you what you want to do. I'm just sharing the process that's worked for me. For the purposes of this video, I'm just demonstrating. This is a tray and it's a solid bottom tray. Notice it has no holes in it. Normally when I fertilize inside of my solid bottom 10 by 20 trays. But I just wanted to show you what I would be doing in terms of fertilizing. So let's say that this is dry, and right now it's not because we just added pre-moistened potting mix to it. But let's say it's dry. What I would be doing is I would be adding about 1 inch of my water, which again has fertilizer in it at this point. And then I would be placing my 6 cell packs inside of that tray. And what would happen is they would be wicking up the water from the holes below up to the plant. So I'm going to pour about 1 inch of water. Doesn't have to be exact, it's an estimate. And then a lot of times I'll have a whole tray full of seedlings, and then I can leave them alone for a little while. And what would happen is that normally this would be maybe a light brown color, or this would be very light when you pick it up. And over some period of time, and it's going to vary from plant to plant, what will happen is this light color might turn a dark color, or it might go from feeling very light to feeling pretty heavy. That's when you know to stop. So you can then do a couple of things once you know that your seedlings have gotten enough fertilizer. You can remove your cell packs from the tray and place them into another tray that has no water in it. Or you can go ahead and dump out all the water from your tray. The key is you don't want your seedlings sitting in water, because what will happen is they're going to get too much water and then they can end up rotting. The roots will end up rotting. So no matter how you do it, and there's different ways to do it, just make sure after you're done bottom watering that you remove your trays from standing water. So for example, these are rosemary plants, and yes, they're in 2-inch pots, but nevertheless, what I would normally do is lift a few out. I would pour the water in this 10 by 20 solid bottom tray, and I would let the plants wick up the water. And then when they're all done wicking it up, I would lift this whole tray very carefully, and I would dump out the water from a corner of the tray. But I get it that that might be too hard or too heavy for some people. So be creative on whatever you need to do. If you need to then remove all of your containers from the tray that had the water and place them into another tray that doesn't have the water, you can do that as well. I like to fertilize my plants every 1 to 2 weeks. And once the plants are much bigger, at that point, they will be getting a full strength of fertilizer. Remember, when it comes to your seedlings, it's very important to be bottom watering them. If you water them from above, there's a chance they're going to get damping off, which is basically when the plant just falls over and it just dies. So it's important to bottom water. You can go ahead and water from the top once the plants are much larger and much more established. As is with any seedling, the first set of leaves that you notice are called the cotyledons. At that point, the plant does not need to be fertilized. The reason why you don't fertilize a plant when it has only its cotyledon leaves is because the plant actually has everything it needs in terms of nutrients at that point. It starts needing fertilizer once the first set of true leaves appear. My seedlings will continue to stay under the grow lights, and the grow lights are about 2 to 3 inches above the seedlings. I made a video talking a little bit more about my grow lights, and I'll put a link to that video down in the description below. I also have a fan that's running in the room 16 hours a day. It comes on when the lights come on and it turns off when the lights turn off. This oscillating fan helps with adding air movement. That's very important to create nice, strong, healthy seedlings. Let me know if you're growing any begonias from seed, and if so, how are your plants doing? And are you doing anything differently than I am? Please drop it down in the comment section below. I'll be sure to give you updates once the plants have gotten a little bit bigger, and then I'll show you my process for pinching back the plants and then eventually getting them out in my landscape. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.